And go ahead, Riza, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and get rolling.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm excited to be here today, sharing this space. Oh, let's see. If you take a moment, I'm just getting myself acclimated, but as I'm doing that, I'm going to add this web link in the chat so that you can all please sign in for me. This will allow you to send follow-up emails. Get there. You can use your phone and scan the QR code, or you can just copy and paste the link that is on your screen. I'll give you a moment to do that. Okay. Has everybody had a chance? Just a thumbs up if you have. I'm not sure why I'm not able to see my Zoom right now. Oh, there you are. Okay. Awesome. See those thumbs up coming in. Got about half of you letting me know that you've done that. All right, looks like we are good to go. Okay, so welcome to Building Safe, Culturally Responsive and Inclusive Classrooms. You are also welcome to use the subtitles, the captions on if it helps you follow the training today a little bit better. Just going to give you a brief description. In the health education space, students are often asked to reflect on their own health practices and explore potentially sensitive topics. And in order to develop student knowledge of the health skills and the concepts, right, teachers must first create a space where students feel safe and empowered to be just themselves. And that means that we need to adapt our classrooms, ourselves really, to really be able to meet the needs of different learning styles, right? Adjusting our social interactions by avoiding binary narratives, which will help students' social skills, right, to make relevant connections about themselves and their community. If students' identities aren't acknowledged or they experience exclusionary practices, that conduct actually has consequences and it does impact health outcomes. So when our educational spaces are more inclusive, so are the concepts of health literacy. And that's what our time together is going to entail. A really ambitious agenda today. So I am Raisa. My pronouns are she, hers, ella, si hablan español. I'm the lead professional learning facilitator, RMC Health. And at RMC Health, we provide professional learning and capacity building that helps you transform your knowledge and skills into effective health programs and policies so that champions like yourselves can help young people live their best lives. So that's really the work that we do. For our time together, here's our objectives. I'm going to let you read those really quickly. We're going to reflect on the complex concept of safety. And again, using culturally responsive teaching practices to foster inclusion. And then we're going to prepare some personal statements on creating safer spaces for more perspectives and experiences to enhance that learning. For those of you who are just joining us, please go ahead and sign in to the link that's in the chat so that you're able to get the follow-up email. And if Andrew, you wouldn't mind copying and pasting that in case more folks come in, because they might not always have access to the chat in about another 5 minutes. And here's how we're going to do that work. I have a training guide for you. So if you would please click the following link in the chat to access that. Let me know if you have any issues. But we're going to be using a variety of online learning tools I'll be referencing this guide that I just added to the chat. It'll really pull everything together to complete our activities. And then we're going to use some interactive tools outside of Zoom, like Mentimeter, Google Docs, Padlet, and I will guide you when we get to those places. You don't have to be particularly tech savvy. You'll just have to click a couple links, it'll take you right there. And along with those Zoom tools as well, like breakout rooms, using your chat, using your mic, etc. And if you're having any technical issues, just let me know and I will address your concern as best as I can as I'm facilitating. Okay. So usually I would suggest that you create these learning community agreements or your group agreements with your students, because it really allows your students to participate fully in what they would like their group norms to be. And so as your facilitator, I am committed to your collective safety, which means that it's my role to hold space for respectful exchange. And for those voices that are underrepresented, but often affected in those health outcomes. And so we make room for feedback and improvement. I will correct any gendered language just to model neutral language. So, please accept that as modeling and nothing more than. Do assume goodwill and explore impact across lines of difference. There's going to be some things that are going to come up that we may not necessarily 100% agree with, but find your place in that. And for you, this is your learning, for your wisdom, and really to speak from your experience. So I invite you to take risks. Today, I also ask you to use I statements and share at your comfort level. I mean, this is being recorded and we are in a group, so I can't guarantee 100% confidentiality. Not that we're going to go that deep into any of this, but really just think about your humility, your culture humility, and invest in your own learning. And again, I'm not the expert here today. We all have valid voice, valid experience, lived experience that really provides that impact to the work that we do. Do we have any questions about these agreements? And are there any that we need to add that will make you feel welcomed and excited to participate today? If we're in agreement, why don't you go ahead and use your reaction buttons and give me the party symbol, because we're going to get this started. All right, I got some love too. Love it. Okay, so here we go. So I always like to start with this. It's my personal cultural humility statement disclaimer. It really just means that I'm paying homage and gratitude to all of the communities of color, people with disabilities, those with limited language proficiency, LGBTQ plus, including those trans and gender diverse communities that have worked relentlessly to really fight those systems of oppression that undermine our health and collective liberation. I could not speak about health and wellness without their participation. Not all of my identities are captured here, but without that participation, teachings, and achievements that have been contributed to the field. My disclaimer here is that the content must be balanced with the knowledge that not all things apply to every individual. So we just need to be mindful of, right, like that group thought. Sometimes it's helpful and informing, other times it doesn't serve us. So just having some knowledge around that. Let's get into our warm-up. So what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to ask you to click again the link in the chat, and you're going to use a code that you see here on your screen. It's also going to be in the chat, so you can just copy and paste. And I'm going to switch my screen. It is a Mentimeter. Let me actually access that first. And we're gonna enter the results here. If I can get to my screen. Here we go. It can be really challenging, folks, when you don't have, are you able to see the Mentimeter screen?
Yep, I see it up here in the background.
Oh, in the background, but not like.
It's your main screen.
It is my main screen.
Yep.
So you can see the cloud. No, okay.
Oh,
that's
no, I
trying to
do
get
not
to.
see the cloud. Sorry.
No worries. All right, let's see. All right, so you're just to answer, what were the characteristics of your favorite classrooms as a student? I see that I have a lot of responses here. Aha. Now we're able to get cooking. I believe you're able to see this cloud now. And all of you have up to 3 responses that you can add to this if you choose. Can I have someone whose name contains the letter A read off some of the responses that you're seeing for the favorite characteristics of a classroom when you were a student? Anyone?
Safe.
Casey?
I can read some of them. Oh.
Great. Shauna, we'll come to you. I'm going to have Casey read a few and then I'll come to you. Thank you.
Okay, colorful, safe, engaging, welcoming, collaborative.
Okay. Thank you. Shauna, why don't you continue?
Fun, engaging, clean, interactive, teamwork, student-centered.
Okay. Thank you. What do we notice about these themes? What observations are we making? What's come up?
We have a few responses in the chat.
Okay.
We have positive, engaging environments, engaging. Students need a positive learning environment.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. I'm trying to capture them as we go. So they're positive. It sounds like engaging environments. So it has a lot to do with the classroom setting and how it made people feel in that space. I really like the feedback here that I see that says conducive to student growth. Why is that particularly an attractive answer, you think? This is going to be an interactive workshop.
So I put it
So
in,
definitely.
I put it in the chat. I put conducive to student growth. And I think that's very important because as teachers, we are supposed to create this safe space for students to want to learn and want to engage into the activity. So creating that foundation for them, it will help them, you know, just forget about the outside world and just come in and focus on what is needed for them to get to the next level and for them to have a safe space, as I said earlier.
Yeah, for all of those reasons and much more, right? And how do I pronounce your name? Is it Zenobia?
Perfect, yes.
Got you. I got you. Okay. Yeah. So I see here another response that says it shows inclusive learning environment. Yeah, that's really what we're getting at. It's the things that Zenobia just highlighted that we're going to really capture today in our learning. Eduardo, I see your hand up.
I was just thinking kind of like of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like one of them is safety and love and belonging, and those are some of the things that were included in some of those words.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's absolutely keen and salient point that you make there. Agreed. All right, I'm just taking a quick picture of this so I can send it to you all later. And you are exactly right. Let me just clear these drawings here and continue on. So yeah, the takeaway here is that people felt safe, right? There was safety in that space. And, you know, Eduardo, you highlighting belonging, absolutely, right? Like belonging is an emotional outcome. Kind of hard to measure. You either feel it, right? Or you kind of feel it or you don't. And that's in many spaces. So something for us to keep in mind. So when we are trying to define safety and belonging, when we think about safety, it can be really elusive, right? And why so? Because everyone defines safety and belonging differently. I mean, that's really what it comes to. Sometimes we think of safety as like rules, right? And laws and procedures. Other times we just feel safety, like what it might be in our own bodies or what it means, right? In that space in my head. So we all define that differently. And then belonging, as you see here with my pictures of diverse people, right? Again, our lenses, our lived experience really navigate that lens in which we view the world and what we consider safe or not safe. So what I might think is safe and creating a good vibe, right? Somebody else might be like, Risa, like I would not choose that, right? Those things do the opposite for me. And so keeping that in mind. And so what happens is that it'll feel like a moving target. And so sometimes you'll hit, sometimes you'll miss, like you see here on my screen, but ultimately it's a journey, not a destination. And so when we have that in mind, then we know that people are arriving or students are arriving at a place, right? That we're just one blip. We might know them in second grade and see them in fifth grade. It might be a completely different person. Maybe we know them in fifth and we'll see them in high school. We might even run into them as adults, right? So what's the learning moment and that they'll remember is how you made them feel. So just to have some shared understanding around what I say is diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, belonging and justice, I thought it would be helpful to provide just some definitions of what I mean. And so I'm going to be using these words in our session today, but it is a frame of reference, okay? So diversity is noticing and appreciating difference. And equity, it's recognizing and redressing power imbalances. And so what that means is that we are able to, well, we hope to aim, right, to be able to give all of our students the same opportunities as often and as justly as we can. And so we do that by eliminating barriers. Now we get to the other side of the wheel here, inclusion. Those are intentional acts, okay, that we use to welcome all people and ideas. That is where that comes from. And belonging, accessibility, I apologize, is giving equitable access, right, to everyone on a continuum of the human ability and experience. So that we really take into consideration, you know, what those needs might mean. And then there's belonging, again, which is the feeling of connectedness and security. And when you see justice, which kind of encompasses everything, is that, you know, we're operating in systems that are sometimes archaic, right? I saw like this I think it was a GIF that was like, we're doing 21st century learning with 20th century, right, ideas, and 19th century, right, like text and etc. So we want to be able to fix those systems that we possibly can. We're not going to make big changes, right, in an hour and a day, but by trying to repair and restore the climate and culture that allows everyone to reach their full potential and thrive. That's really what justice is how to, when we're looking, right, how are we able to uplift and have others thrive to their full potential. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put you in breakout rooms really quickly. I just like you to take a moment to introduce yourselves in your breakout rooms. Please include your pronouns if you choose. Let folks know where you're joining from, and then just have a quick discussion around how do these definitions that I provided inform your understanding of safety and belonging. So that's the question. And I'll add that to the chat as I am opening breakout rooms. And then I'll see you in about 4 minutes. So it's going to be really quick. And you should be able to see a prompt that's asking you to join. Welcome back. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a brief introduction with your colleagues and peers. Some of you had 3 to a group, others had 4, others had partners, all good. My question to you is, can I just have a couple of people share out there, like the gist of the conversation regarding your understanding of these definitions and how it informs safety and belonging? You can go ahead and raise your hand virtually. That seems to work a little better for me. And you're also welcome to share in the chat as well. So okay, I guess I'm going to go ahead and call on, let's see, Trevor, do you mind sharing the gist of your conversation with your breakout room?
Yeah, it was interesting. One of our people couldn't get their sound to work, so it was kind of a 2-person conversation. And it was interesting contrasting. I teach in person and the other person teaches virtually.
Oh,
But we have different teachers at my school. We have different teachers for every grade level. So we only see the kids for a year. But the other teacher, even though they're virtual, they keep the same kids all through middle school or all through high school. So just different kinds of relationships. And we spoke about the importance of, darn it, I don't remember which concept it was of yours, but it's something that's often referred to as a noun and you have it as a verb. And I really like that. There's so many of these terms that we think of as nouns. I had the example of compassion that really are, inclusion was the one you had.
yeah.
It's not a noun, it's a verb. It's something you have to do all the time.
Yeah.
So, and compassion is one of the ones I use. I have little pictures I give my students if they want them, and one of them says compassion is a verb.
I really love that you're using just compassion, because I know in our organization, we say compassionate accountability. So when we're not meeting the moment, right, or we're not showing up as our best selves, that we're, having some compassion and still holding accountability, right, to like our commitment, right, to diversity, equity, and inclusion, justice and belonging, accessibility. So again, it's about just taking a moment to be humble, thinking about like, right, that humility, and then the learning, moving on with that. So
Yeah,
thank you for sharing.
I actually owe one of my students a public apology on Monday.
Great, thank you, Trevor. Appreciate your share. Okay, so let's get into culturally responsive teaching skills-based health ed. This was really coined by Gloria Ladson-Billings, and it was really created to describe a form of teaching that calls for engaging learners whose experiences and cultures are traditionally excluded from the mainstream settings. Certainly this has changed over time, but specifically for Ladson-Billings, she proposed 3 goals that in teaching, we must, 1, yield to academic success, right? So like that's the high expectation, to help students develop positive ethnic and cultural identities while simultaneously helping them achieve academically, and then support students' ability to recognize, understand, and critique current and social inequities. And so when you center these practices, it can empower students, not only intellectually, but socially, emotionally, and at times politically. And so basically, from that work, Dr. Geneva Gay made this quote in 2000s, and she really developed a framework based off of Gloria Ladson-Billings' work for culturally responsive teaching that was in the 90s, which really emphasizing just using the cultural knowledge, right, the prior experiences, frames of reference, and performance styles of ethnically diverse students to make learning encounters, 1, relevant and, right, effective for them. And so you might think back to a time in your K-12 experience and really go, was I represented? Did those things apply to me? Did it apply to my neighbor? Did it reference my language, my foods, my culture, right? Like the community that you lived in, just that type of just knowledge and frames of reference. And so when we're thinking about the goals of health education, here's basically what we're saying. And it's these 4 points. The goal is really to develop health literacy, right? By students having self-efficacy in their, right, in their ability to thrive. And so maintain healthy behaviors, change unhealthy behaviors, and especially to delay the onset of use or experimentation with risk or unhealthy behaviors. And so what happens is when we think of the purpose of health ed in these terms, it makes sense that teaching only concepts or just content, right? Like, for example, having students memorize the parts of the body doesn't actually help us reach these goals. And so when I say skills, health skills, these are the skills that I'm referring to. These come from the National Health Education Standards. They're really the standards 2 through 8 that you see here. And they outline different skills that students need to develop health literacy and reach those goals of health education. I also want you to know that these skills can be applied across content areas. So this is based on research. The CDC provided this to us, and they're broken down by the grade level that you teach and what performance indicators might be for us to know that our students are meeting these. But this is really like a lever for health equity, because whatever students' backgrounds are, right, these skill sets, again, evidence-based, as we cultivate and nurture these, right, we'll be able to improve those health outcomes. And this is the first place to start when you're planning around student skill development. And stay tuned for my next session on more on that. But for now, Maslow before Bloom is a phrase that really discusses the hierarchy of needs, right? And then Benjamin Bloom's educational learning objectives. The point is this: people need to fulfill their basic needs before pursuing academic learning. So what does that mean? That we get to model, right, intersectionality through these skills, create those spaces of safety and belonging, and build relationships with your students. We know that school is a protective factor, right? That school connectedness and trusted adults help tremendously in meeting those goals of health education. So really what what I'm saying is that taking a skills-based approach to health ed contributes to the conditions for health equity. So it's a restorative approach in what we're trying to utilize, which ultimately leads to those better health outcomes. I think this is a good time to pause before we go right into our strategies, and then we'll get into another activity. So I think we can take a quick 2 minutes, and I want you to know that you can modify these yoga moves for your personal ability and your preference. If you need to get a beverage or just step out for a minute, you have just 2 minutes. And for those of you who are staying with me, you're welcome to turn off your camera if you'd like. If you want to participate with me, you can. I'm just going to turn my seat to the side, and we're just going to hold, stretch back, and hold for a good 20, 30 seconds, because screen fatigue is real. Feel that stretch. Great. If you're able to stand up, if you're able to put your, follow the second picture here where your foot is right on your calf, and raise your hand and give it a good stretch. You can switch sides. Oh, I already feel my back cracking. I'm glad that you all can't hear that. And then a good twist. And then around to the other side. And then a last stand up and just a quick reach over. All right. That refreshed me. I hope it refreshed you. You're welcome to turn on your cams back on so I know that we are ready to go. These are chair yoga poses. You can find them on a simple Google search and incorporate them in, some movement into your lesson planning. Highly recommend that. And so let's go into our strategies for building safety and belonging. So this is what I called the building blocks. On the second page of your session guide, there's a checklist that's going to outline all the things that I am covering in these next slides. And I just ask you to consider to keep track of what you already use, right? So let's recognize your strengths and some areas of, improvement that you might need. And then once you figure out what those are, you might want to select just a couple of them that you don't use, but want to begin to engage, okay, as a way to begin to incorporate this moving forward. Okay, so here's the building blocks that we're going to be exploring. So it's personal reflection and mindsets, laws and policy, classroom culture and management, and then representative and inclusive curriculum. What I want you to know is it is important to know that the order of implementation is not important. Okay, what is important here is that these are interdependent with each other rather than sequential to each other. And so you'll see these in different configurations because it means that you, the professional, right, in your own practice has a discretion to figure out what works and what you might want to use first, what you're good at, etc. So I'm going to give you some additional information on what these are so that you can, again, put these concepts together. So remember that everyone's perspective, right, is partial and shaped by our own experiences. And so when we're taking an in-depth look, when we take the time to do that, and we're paying attention to our thoughts and feelings and learning more about our own identities or the positions, right, that we occupy, where we may not have been necessarily conscious about it in the past, right? This increases your self-awareness in relation to others' lived experience. And so some ways to do that are what you see here. So identity mapping, reflection on intersections of privilege and marginalization, bias, exploration, interrogation, practice cultural humility, and seek diverse perspectives and representation. Now, what I'm going to do is add a handout to the chat. And we're going to just focus on identity mapping. Okay, so it's just one strategy in this personal reflection. And so here's what it looks like. You're going to think about, let me go back. You're going to think about just the different intersections of just how you just want to be able to name or make a list of all the groups that you belong to, however you define them to be. Okay, and the handout looks like this. And then there are some prompts there that are just there to provoke your thoughts, okay, to help you perhaps come up with a list that you can fill in. This is a fillable PDF. You can also save it and and use it in the future. So I'm going to give you 3 minutes to quickly jot some ideas down. Again, we're just scratching the surface here. And then we'll do a debrief. And as you're doing that in these 3 minutes, I'm going to use some music. And hopefully we will not get an ad.
Teachers, let's face it,
And
it's
we
not
did.
always easy to keep our students focused. You want to know my secret weapon? Education.com.
Here we go. We have a couple more minutes to go. About a minute left. All right, I hope that that felt good for you to just take a moment and think about all the identities that you have. And so I'm going to ask you to debrief this. You don't have to share particularly the things that you've written if they're personal to you, but I would like for you to share why is thinking about your own identity is important when teaching health ed? And is your own identity something you think about often when teaching health education? So why don't we focus on the first question? Who would like to answer? Why is thinking about your identity is important when we're teaching health education? You can unmute your mic.
Don't be shy.
Brittany?
I'm gonna take a stab at this. I think maybe because we have our own lived experience with our identities that, we have, but that does not represent all the identities that our students have. And so when we're thinking about health education, we could be teaching from a narrow lens that is just representing our identities and our experiences. And we might negate to touch on topics that would be important for other communities or other identities.
Yeah. Great. That was a great answer, right? I mean, we know that our identities are also trigger points for us, right? And might also be, an opportunity for us to also be mindful about being more trauma informed, as we're, right, talking about health behaviors and being really careful and resist the urge, right, to label things good, bad, right, positive, negative, but really trying to meet it with neutrality, right? And in a manner of being able to state the things as, can we make healthier options? And why might this be good for you? I see some things coming into the chat, which I'm really excited about. It says, past experience in our identity helps us understand what we went through and helps us relate to our students and be fair, equitable, and accepting of all. It reminds us of our biases to be fair and equally when teaching students. Yeah, absolutely. And so when we're thinking about our own identity, right, is this something that you think about often? By a show of hands, just like on the screen, do you think about your identity when you are teaching? Okay, I see a couple, like you're keenly aware, right, of who you are, what you bring in that room, your privilege, right, your lived experience, and those that might match or be opposite of those whom you teach or of the community that you're in. So here's what I can tell you. It's okay to not know or to not have knowledge around ways of living that are different than your own. And so when expanding our knowledge base and engaging with cultural brokers, right, to learn more about communities or the content and context about lived experience that you're not familiar with. This is an opportunity, to meet this with cultural humility. Here are some activists that we've highlighted. And so, learning about them. You see underneath their names who they are and what they, right, represent, if you will, or what they advocate for. And so spokespeople and shows may actually deepen your understanding and provide you with at least affirming language when you're approaching those sensitive health topics to further empower youth, right, that do share these lived frames of reference. And then having that flexibility to what is unique to those individuals. And so these are just a few. You're going to get this PowerPoint, so you don't have to furiously write these down. But there's so many more. There's just like so many more. So what we're going to do is move into really came up a little differently here for me, but laws and policy. And so what does that mean? It means that it's also important to know that that this strategy is centered on what our legal compliance are, right, as professionals with our students and our classrooms. And then at times we are tasked to do what we're tasked to do might be in direct conflict with our students' identities and their needs.
Building.
I'm sorry, what was that? Okay. So when, we are faced with repercussions where we must make professional decisions that support students. And so we just want to make note here that there are sometimes laws and policies that undermine that safety and belonging in the classroom. And that really it's up to you to make whatever professional decisions you need to make, for yourself in your classroom and your students.
So just wanted to
Yes.
give you your 10-minute warning.
Thank you.
Yep, no
Thank
problem.
you. And so here you want to be able to highlight some classroom norms, kind of like what we did in the beginning, right? To create that building safety along with accountability. And we want to be able to set the stage for connection so that we are able to get to know students. I really stress trying to use anti-oppressive language, right? So again, that binary, like roles and gender types, right? Or cultural tropes, etc. But really meeting when you are in a positive space, what does that sound like, right? We're not policing bodies, we're not shaming on food choices or eating habits, right? You keep your health advice to yourself, like, oh, you're having a soda. You know, you might say, oh, you're having a soda. And you know what I do? I add, for every soda that I have a glass of water too, right? It's an and, right? Both. Again, to reduce some of that stigma and shaming, right? Ableist language, racist beauty standards, diet and weight talk, especially when we talk about nutrition. Or when we talk about PE, right? Like we can say movement. What feels good to you in your body when you move it? What kinds of movements do you like? So you want to be able to set the stage for connection and get to know students. We're not going to go into this Padlet because I'd like to do another activity. But what I wanted to I think we can do this by folks sharing out what are some actions and behaviors that would help or get in the way of knowing students? So what would help? What are some things you think that could help in your classroom? Getting to know students. What kinds of things have you used in your practice? Casey.
One of our teachers does a student spotlight where they fill out a form and then she will spotlight a student so that they get to know each other and she gets to know them.
Awesome. That's a great way of really celebrating, right? Like the communities that are in your school and in your classroom. What is something that you might have observed, like an action or behavior that gets in the way of knowing students? Any thoughts or ideas here? Any actions that you've observed?
We have a couple things in the chat.
Okay.
It says all about me, something interesting about each student. And Shauna mentions gets in the way, focusing on negative behaviors.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So trying to resist the urge, right, of labeling, with trying to, again, meet with neutrality, the languages that are used in class, building those positive relationships, building those positive student connections. And honestly, learning student names and pronouns are also, right, in important ways that we can connect students to. The other piece here that might have a little bit more pressure, what you see is representative and inclusive curriculum, right? You want to be able to display, right, some decorations that acknowledge those identities of students. There may be more pressure to be what I would say LGBTQIA competent, but not necessarily anti-racist. So we're not always like in the know about that. Sorry, my dog is barking. Hold on, folks. Okay. And so really what this is allowing for you to operate with the understanding of the barriers, right, that your students may face. So lastly, what I would like you to do is to think about, actually, I'm going to go back to this really quickly. I want you to just answer this to yourself. What stands out most about culturally responsive teaching to you today? What challenge you're thinking about culturally responsive teaching? What do these examples mean for us in our teaching? And what will you use? So when you're thinking about this ORID, this is just a way that we do a debrief, right? Objective, so questions that analyze our thinking. reflective, how we feel, questions are meaning or value, which is interpretive, and questions to prompt action. So what I'd like you to do is to take a moment to reflect on our time together and what we've learned, and to prepare your personal statements on creating space for more perspectives and experiences to enhance learning and minimize harm. So this is your statement. So if you were going into the classroom, what one-liner might you say that's inclusive, affirming, and empowering to the students in your classroom? And as an example, when I started our session today, I said, hi, I'm Raisa, and my pronouns are. I want you to know that I value each and every one of you. I'm looking forward to learning, right, about the identities, your families, your communities, and we want to invite that all into our classroom so we can all learn about each other. As an example, right? It's inclusive, it's affirming, and it's letting kiddos know that you are a safe and trusted adult. Safe maybe yet to be determined by them, but beginning that trusted adult conversation. So you're going to have just a moment to think about that. Unless you have a quick statement that you've already come up with and you would like to share that, I invite you to do so now. Oh, I see one in the chat. I hope I'm saying your name right. Shayna? Thumbs up if I said that right. And if I did not.
It's Shanna. Sorry, I'm
Shanna.
losing
Oh,
my
it is
voice.
exactly as it looks. Okay, got it. And it says, we are all a family. We accept each other and we are here to help each other. Love it. So good thing to think about. And I see some kudos to that. So in our closing, here's what I anticipated the session to be about. Just a quick recap, right? We reflected on those complex concepts of safety. We took a moment to examine our identities. We discussed those actions and behaviors that might help or hinder getting to know students, ways that we can utilize some of those building blocks as inclusive practices. And then you had an opportunity, a brief opportunity, to create your own personal statement or mantra to safety and belonging. So all to try to meet these three objectives. I know that there's a survey in the conference survey, but I do ask for you to take a moment to enter a training to fill out this training, this session evaluation that's specific to me in my session. It'll just take a moment to do that. If you like what I did here today, please think about other training opportunities that RMC Health provides, and these are some that are on your screen. We just did a snippet of building a safe and inclusive community in health education. We do offer this in a full day and really deep dive into more of these concepts with other activities. And if I can just have a couple folks complete as our closing activity. This is kind of like your exit ticket, as we say. Pick one of these sentence stems and close it out. And then I thank you for having me.
Well, thank you so much, Riza. I know we're at time now at 10:20. And want to make sure people have opportunity to change rooms. They want to change rooms. Please complete your attendance tracker and session survey and the survey that Riza left in the chat for you as well. Our next session in this room will be integrating health skills, practice opportunities, and culturally responsive practices into health education classrooms with Riza. So she'll be with us one more time here. So thank you all, and go ahead and head on to your next session. We hope that some of you will stay here with us. So thank you so much.